Hi everyone. Welcome to the Using Instructional Design and ADDIE Processes to Improve Training Program session offered at Northwest Akuho in January of 2012. My name is Chad Pate and I'm the Director of On-Campus Student Housing at Skagit Valley College. I work as the Director of On-Campus Student Housing, and I know many of you work in similar roles at other institutions, but I know we do have some corporate training professionals here in the audience, and so I wanted to share with you why this program or this session will be relevant to you. My master's degree is actually in adult learning and was not specially emphasized the concept of student development or adult education from a higher education standpoint. It was really much more general than that. I went into higher education because at the time it was really a passion of mine, and I've continued on that route. But I'm finding more and more that my colleagues are not necessarily as adaptive to improving their processes or applying well-researched learning theory to their areas of expertise, because in higher education, each individual is sort of specialized or has become sort of a contact for a content area. We call those subject matter experts. So I'm hoping today that we can go back to our roots and talk about how these design theories are relevant to all of us as supervisors or training professionals, and how we can learn to adapt our processes to become more relatable to the general learning industry as a whole. This is the first of two programs. Our second program will be tomorrow, face-to-face, where we'll be doing some application of what we're learning today. So feel free to take some notes. We'll go over some of these concepts again tomorrow as a reminder, and I'll give out some great handouts for you to take home. But this really is a call to action. So today is the lecture, tomorrow's the application, and then when you get home to your home institutions or your companies, I'm hoping that you actually implement some of what we talk about today. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to be defining some critical concepts. I think it's important for us to all be on the same page in terms of a unified language of how we in the learning industry define some concepts and some theories and how they actually function on a day-to-day basis. That's going to be the second part of today, which is applying the concepts to employee training functions. And I'm going to give you an opportunity towards the end of this session, and also call to action between today's session and tomorrow's, to reflect on the relevance to your home institution and really think about what this means for you. What of these concepts or what of these processes are you actually applying? Are you calling them what they are, or are you calling them something different? And how can you incorporate more of these concepts, if you're interested, into your actual processes now? All right, so no good learning program is complete without some objectives. And I'm calling these objectives today because they're really more things that I'm hoping you will take away from the entire curriculum of today's sessions and tomorrow's session. They're not necessarily things I will be able to measure right now. The outcome for today is that you apply at least one concept that we talk about today. But the objectives include articulating connections between instructional design methodology and your specific training program. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to go over everyone's different training program philosophy or structure. One, because I don't know all of them, but also two, because they're as diverse as you are. Your different positions, your different institutions, your different companies are going to be offering different training opportunities and at a different level of frequency than others. So I'm going to keep it as general as possible. You're also going to be recognizing new and creative ways to design training programs for employees. So I'll be offering an opportunity for you to challenge who and how these training programs are planned, or at least to think about it, something to bring back to your supervisor or to your department. If you have any sort of structural say in how these things are planned, maybe you can make some changes. Define learning outcomes for future staff training programs. So I will kind of explain to you why that's important and why the learners will want to know what those outcomes are ahead of time. And then I'm going to propose some relevant improvements in staff learning transfer. So how you can not necessarily measure, we'll talk about that tomorrow in terms of return on investment, but how you can focus on the application of skills in a training philosophy or a training program. All right. So starting off, important definitions. The first definition is a word that very few people that I've interacted with in higher education are familiar with, and that is andragogy. The concept of andragogy is much more popular in a corporate environment, a training environment, because it is literally defined as the art and science of helping adults learn. That's from Robert Rowden's book relating to workplace learning. So andragogy may sound very similar to a concept many of you are familiar with, which is pedagogy. And pedagogy has been over time translated to a theory of unified education. So how we impart knowledge on others. But the reason I'm using the word andragogy, and the reason it's different from pedagogy, is because if you literally translate pedagogy, it means the art and science of helping children learn. And the philosophical application of these two theories are very different. So those who study the concepts of pedagogy tend to believe that an instructor or a subject matter expert is able to then impart knowledge on what we call the empty vessel, or someone who needs to be filled because they do not have the knowledge necessary to function within a particular subject matter area. So there's an expert and a novice, and the novice is developed into an expert over time by fellow experts. Not a totally unrealistic concept. You've probably experienced that every day of your life when you were growing up in K through 12. Andragogy is different. Andragogy breaks down the dichotomy between teacher-learner and states that everyone comes to the table because they're adults with different experiences and different backgrounds and applications of knowledge. When we sit in a classroom, there are going to be some people who know more about the subject than others. And therefore, rather than denying equal access for everyone to be on the same page, we are going to go forth and allow the students to share in the instructional processes by sharing their insights. We're also going to give the learners an opportunity to understand why we are trying to teach them what we need them to learn. That is a critical component to adult learning and the difference between an adult and a child. A child could theoretically be more receptive to information and knowledge without really understanding how it applies to their life. I always go back to my experience in calculus when I was in high school, or pre-calculus, I suppose. I didn't love calculus. I didn't understand why I was learning calculus, but I knew in order to get the grade I needed to graduate that I had to complete the calculus course. In a college or adult level learning concept or a training concept, the instructor would impart on the learner some information or some insight relating to how pre-calculus will apply to them in the future. So, instructional design. This is an important thing for you to know, and hopefully you didn't just kind of blindly come into this session not really having some idea of what instructional design means. Instructional design is the systematic process by which instructional materials are designed, developed, and delivered. I will take it a couple steps further. It's really the process in which instructional materials are analyzed, then designed, then developed, then implemented or delivered, and then evaluated. So that would be the ADDIE process, and we'll go over that in a minute. Instructional design is not a science. Instructional design can look different from one person to another. In the corporate world, it's very often tied to instructional technology. It is sometimes equated to instructional development. It's sometimes equated to training faculty or other instructors on how to use certain systems. So instructional design, very generalized concept, but it is a field in and of itself. Learning transfer is an important piece of information for you all to know because it essentially delineates classroom learning, generalized classroom learning, from skills-based training. And we're going to be focusing on the training aspect of today. So learning transfer is the application of skills in an informational environment. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a training setting like I said here, but it could be really in any setting, self-directed or otherwise. to their specific job or life function. So a general way of saying learning transfer is if someone who stays at home, a stay-at-home parent, wants to learn how to make meatloaf, they might look in a cookbook, learn the recipe for meatloaf, and then practice that, and then over time become better and better at it. That is transfer of learning. They have transferred the knowledge that they gained on their own to a skill. In a training context, that would be when an instructor or a trainer might show a new computer system, an employee how to use a new computer system, and then the employee goes back to their desk and starts using that system right away. That would be learning transfer. All right, so now for ADDIE. ADDIE is formally titled the Training Process Model, and it was really made popular by Blanchard and Thacker. The book that I'm pulling from was written in 2013. This process has been around for years and years and years, long before that. But and the reason it was 2013 and this is a 2012 concept is because that's when the copyright of the book was. I'm sure they wrote the book in like 2010. So first I wanted to start off letting you know that ADDIE is an acronym. It is not in and of itself a concept. It's a series of processes that an instructional designer or instructor or trainer will undergo in order to fulfill certain instructional requirements in order to really present a truly informed and effective training program. So the A in ADDIE stands for analysis. That would be a needs analysis, a pre-employment evaluation of skill, review of a job description compared to a new employee's resume, things like that, an analysis of what needs to be learned. That often comes down from above. So when a new system is implemented on your campus or in your company, IT is probably telling you that it needs to be implemented, and that's probably coming from someone up on the cabinet level or the executive level. So the analysis could be directive to you, but to be truly effective, it should be analyzed scientifically. The first D in ADDIE stands for design, and that is where a flow of information is then mapped out and idealized. That's also where the construction of a learning outcome or a series of learning outcomes is created. So the design phase is really more of the intellectual planning aspect of a training program. The second D goes very closely along with design, and that stands for development, and that is the physical construction of a program. Reserving the rooms, reserving the technology, creating the presentation itself, maybe even pulling the learners in or sending them meeting requests to get them on the calendar. That's the physical process that you undergo to create the program. And that's usually done in conjunction with some administrative team members or some technological tools used in collaboration. I in ADDIE is implementation, and that is the physical presentation of a training program. So right now I am in the process of implementing the first phase of our training program. So this is an implementation phase. Simple enough. And E is evaluation, and evaluation is, it can be during the training program an assessment of learning. It's also most commonly a post-program assessment of learning. And it can also incorporate Kirkpatrick's first level of educational learning evaluation, which is essentially how much did the learners enjoy the process of learning in this environment. I'll be giving you a survey at the end of the second day tomorrow, sort of measuring both what you learned through a little bit of a quiz, but don't worry, obviously it's not great and there's no implication for you to answer the questions correctly or incorrectly, but also what about the program can be improved in the future to make it more engaging and enjoyable. These processes together seem linear. So it may seem like, well, of course, at the beginning you'll start off with analysis and then you'll go into design, development, implementation, and evaluation. That's how originally it was designed. Over time, people have come up with different ways of applying ADDIE. My particular favorite application of ADDIE is to consider it a cycle, so maybe arranging these pencils in a circle instead of in a line, so that the analysis phase leads directly into design, then development, implementation, and evaluation, which leads back into analysis, because we know as trainers we're going to be going through training programs multiple times with probably multiple different stakeholders on multiple different levels of the organization. That's particularly relevant in change management when we're talking about a new change or an implementation of a change in which many different people or many different functional areas of the institution or the company are affected. We're probably going to need to continuously improve our programs, and that needs to be measured and implemented over time. So ADDIE, besides being a great framework for training, I love it because it is linear in the sense that you are undergoing certain phases of the design and development process while you're engaging in them. That does not mean that the analysis phase cannot continue going through the design phase and again through the development phase and the implementation phase. I think in reality, different phases interact with each other at different times, but you'll at least be able to measure where you're at in the process by the specific activities you're undertaking. It also addresses essentially all aspects of the planning process. So planning really can include implementation. Many people exclude it because its implementation seems like it's on its own, but if you think about training as something that will continuously be improved and will hopefully over time be implemented multiple times, not necessarily one specific program, but a format of training, for example, it essentially is holistic in the sense that you will be measuring your analysis processes, your design processes, your development processes, your implementation processes, and your evaluation processes, and over time become very effective at what you're doing. It's applicable to a variety of learning environments, and I'm going to tell you it's applicable to a variety of work environments. I apply ADDIE to so many different things that I do on an administrative level, even beyond my education responsibilities. For example, when I'm talking about transitioning new students into our program and transitioning students out, I analyze their applications, design a room assignment that best fits for them, develop an onboarding process, implement their move-in, and then evaluate how effective that was. So that's sort of a eagle-eye view of how ADDIE can be applied to more administrative work. And it can also be used in general project management. So like I said, if you're talking about a project that needs to be implemented or a change that needs to be implemented over the course of a certain period of time, this is a great way to organize how that process is undertaken. So ADDIE applies in sort of a variety of different ways. The slide here says that it transitions the planning process focus away from the end result to both the end result and the process itself. And to me, that's really important. In a corporate environment, I know this from experience, trainings are focused really strongly on return on investment, which is critical. But I think an important part of return on investment that often gets ignored is that if the program itself is a high quality, if the process of planning it itself is a high quality experience, more people will be brought into that process. And as more people are brought into that process, there's more ownership over the learning and training and application of skills over time, which will improve the return on investment over time. So long term, the process of planning a training session should be considered. So here are some common types of training in higher education, and I know some of these are also applicable to the corporate environment. I did not mean to exclude anyone from the corporate environment from this session. The first and probably most common for those of you in higher education are annual face-to-face group trainings. Some of you in the corporate environment might have stockholder meetings or team meetings or team building or energizing activities that you do as a group. But face-to-face group trainings, whether they're annual or semi-regular in any way, shape, or form, are common. Another is individual onboarding. Every environment does this. One-on-one conversations or two-on-one conversations with new employees who are hired on and need to be brought up to speed on on a project or on the philosophy of an institution or company, or really just on their general job functions. Ongoing professional development opportunities that are provided from the corporate or higher education environment are in fact training opportunities. It's the transfer of learning that needs to be really intentional. So making sure that learners are, of course, benefiting emotionally and spiritually and personally from those experiences, but really that they're able to improve their work as a result of those opportunities. That's sort of what makes them professional, not just personal development opportunities. On the job skills building, by far the most common. So sitting down and actually practicing and learning and experiencing the challenges and opportunities that are presented on a day-to-day basis, definitely a key piece, especially for those who are in skilled trades or in skilled environments. Corporate trainers, for example, are usually people who have experience working with individuals on a training concept, and so their experience in training implementation is pretty strong. So on-the-job skills building may be more of a relevant way in which their supervisors or their training professionals are training them, because they have a background, they have skill, they can apply that pretty quickly. And of course, developmental and correction-based conversations or effective coaching and mentoring of employees is a training philosophy. It is an accountability piece, of course, but accountability is really just an opportunity for us to impart our desired performance levels on someone else. All right, so when you are planning a training, I recommend developing a committee. If that's not something that's an opportunity for you, or if you're at a very small institution like I am and maybe these people don't exist, you're going to need to at least develop a consultation network with individual content experts. So, for example, if you need to train as a training professional or training planner, you need to train employees on a new version of Microsoft Excel, and they need to implement it quickly, you're going to need to communicate with a content expert. Now, that may be you. That's very possible. But more often than not, you're not the subject matter expert. Instructional designers, as a rule, are content experts in the process of instructional design. They may or may not be content experts in the work context in which they're working. That's common in the skilled trades area. For a construction company, for example, the trainer may have no background in construction. The instructional designer may have no background in construction, but they may be working with content experts to develop effective ways of training and communicating with people who do have a background in construction, and also ways to anticipate questions and maybe challenges to the instructional material that they would otherwise not be prepared to handle. You also need to incorporate administrative support. That, again, may be you. That's often myself in my current work context. But if you have an administrative team member or someone who's just really skilled in organization, pull them in, involve them, get them engaged, because this is where they will shine, particularly in the development phase. You're going to want to pull in management. They may not want to sit on a committee, but they'll at least need to be consulted pretty regularly on your plans. It's going to depend on your supervisor's sort of philosophy and desire. As a supervisor myself, I always like to say I don't like surprises, so if you could just fill me in, even from, a pie-in-the-sky perspective, what you're doing, that will really help me out so that I'm not taken by surprise in the future if something goes wrong or something goes particularly right. Stakeholder from another functional area. So again, if you're at a small institution or a small company, this may not be relevant, but constituents of effective training usually go beyond clients. They can usually be coworkers or other supervisors in other areas, accounting, all sorts of different individuals. So pull them in, get their feedback on what they believe some skills that an individual will include, and someone who's experienced and skilled in assessment. And please do not only consider qualitative assessment in your considerations. It's absolutely critical. You're going to need to measure return on investment. I'm not going to go over that today. But qualitative assessment is at least something you should be considering in any training context, because you as an instructional designer, you as a trainer need to be evaluated, and that's usually best done by giving directive feedback on how to improve, which is really best done through qualitative feedback. Please don't pull in everyone. If your organization is 10 people total, then yeah, by all means, consult everyone. But if your organization is 1,000 people, you should be in the 10-person range. It really doesn't need to be a huge group. And besides, as the instructional designer, it's your responsibility to really own this process. So this is really just an opportunity for you to get feedback and insight. If it is a formal committee, and if it's not just consultants, this is the role that they play as a group. Assessment of learning needs, so that analysis phase. What do learners need to know? That is their general responsibility. Again, that can be partially directive. Design of learning outcomes and delivery methods and training schedules and all of that other information that cognitively needs to be decided before the development phase. I always like to say at this point should be a checkpoint. Okay, you've analyzed and you've designed, now get feedback on how it's looking. If this is the one thing that the consultants can do for you, then please pursue that opportunity. And that's just recommend the design. I say to management, but include management and the other individuals on the consultation or committee team so that you can get the right feedback at this point. Because once you go on to the on-the-ground tasks, which are next, which is the development phase, it may be harder to go back and change. Connect with and provide guidance to subject matter experts. So they're going to provide guidance to you, of course, on the content of the actual information that needs to be presented. But you're going to be able to give them some insight on the contextual way in which it will be presented, what is the methodology for delivery, all of that information. And then, of course, evaluate the learning transfer, outcome achievement, and ROI. All three of those things absolutely have to be included in order for this to be truly effective. You can measure one or maybe two, but to be truly effective, you might as well go all the way. All right, sometimes your group or you as an individual have to come forward and share some insight with management, and they don't totally buy in. So here are some ways that you can really communicate with them on their level and their understanding of what this will look like, and be the most effective in communicating with them as possible. Now, if you don't get buy-in after communicating in this way, then you're probably going to have to change something in your design process. The first and most important, provide evidence-based recommendations. Just like adult learners want to know why they need to learn something, management or decision makers in your organization need to know why you're talking to them about this. Why is this something that needs budget consideration? Why is this something that needs staff time? Be sure that your analysis is thorough and includes a balance of considerations from your company and also general best practices that we've talked about today. If you're given $50, work within those resources. Pursue external resources if you need them. You know, if you need $100 and you're given $50 for a training program, explain to management why you really should get those extra $50. If it's not a possibility, then maybe either adjust or find some other way to get those $50. The planning timeline, I'm just going to say right now, is never going to be universal. It's absolutely individualized by institution. In residence life or residential life in a college campus, in the context I've worked in, I know that training teams that I've led have taken as much as 2 months to plan a 2.5-week training program. That's not unreasonable. It could take you a day. If you're planning one presentation for one person, it's half an hour. It may just take you a couple of hours to pull that all together. So all of the lead time that you need in collaborating with subject matter experts, all of the lead time your administrative partner here needs, everything that you need in terms of time has to be considered. That's hard to do. My recommendation is to develop a comprehensive list and just checkbox it every time you plan a program. Should be planned around the budget planning process. So if you work at an institution of higher education, you know that that process generally happens either at the first of the annual year or the first of the fiscal year, which can be in the June, July range. and should not interfere with any major events. So generally, don't plan a program on Super Bowl Sunday. Don't plan a program when there is a high level of likelihood that employees will not be present or not be mentally present. You want them to be engaged fully and completely, and you don't want them to be frustrated that something else could be going on. So the reflective discussion will occur tomorrow, but some things that I want to pose to you as questions to consider and talk about with your group tomorrow. First, how were you onboarded, or how were you trained when you first got to your organization? Was it as a group? Was it part of an annual training? Was there a curriculum? Was it just a conversation? Did you read some material? Was it completely self-directed? And ask yourself this: if you left tomorrow, would the organization be prepared to fill your position and have that position functioning within 2 or 3 days? Another question I want to ask of you: how many employees get trained on an annual basis, meaning some new skill is brought forward or some opportunity for professional development is brought forward? My hope is it's 100%, but be realistic. It's probably not. And along with that question, how can you influence your organization to consider a more frequent, and effective training and learning and development opportunity for your employees? Here are my sources. So I talked about a couple of books that I use. Those are really great. I really like the Robert Rowden book, Workplace Learning Principles and Practice. That's a really great book. It's very inexpensive. I think I paid $18 or $19 for that. The Blanchard and Thacker book, this is the 5th edition that I used, and it's brand new. They have obviously 4 other editions that are very, very, very good. Bunk and Graham, the Handbook for Blended Learning, is really great if you do hybrid design, meaning you have a learning management system, and many of you will. You may not even know that you have them. Captivate, Moodle, Blackboard, Angel, any of those different learning management systems. Implementation of some support program along with your face-to-face trainings, or implementation of a fully online training program. This is a great book to get started. Design Central, very entry-level overview of some of the key concepts we went over. And the Elias and Merriam book, Sharon Merriam and Joseph Elias, Philosophical Foundations of Adult Education. What an awesome book. I mean, I read this in grad school, and I was going to return the book because it was really expensive, and so I just held on to it because it was so great. That is a book I use all the time because it helps me consider the eagle-eye view of what I'm doing. Am I working in a liberal education philosophy? Am I working in a progressive skills-based application philosophy, which is what we talked about today? All sorts of different concepts that are very simple to understand once you get the key terms down, so I really recommend that text as well. This is my contact information. You also have my business card as part of your orientation packet. Please feel free to contact me. My institutional information is on there. This is my personal information, so please feel free to contact me at any time if you have any questions or if you want to talk about some of the resources I used or some of the information I've imparted today. I hope that you enjoyed today. I hope you really enjoyed tomorrow. That's going to be the meat and potatoes of our session. I really feel a passion for this stuff, and I implement it in everything that I do, so I hope that you start to feel a passion for it as well. Thank you so much. Have a great day.